I can't see you, but good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to participate in the roundtable. In collaboration with Dr. Jane Kelly and two former graduate students, Adrian Offenbecker and Courtney McConan-Borstad, we undertook an isotopic study of the human remains from Paquimé and Convento to address a number of longstanding questions about the people who lived at Paquimé. The careful documentation of burials by members of the Joint Casas Grandes expedition, as well as previous studies of remains in this area by numerous researchers, has provided an excellent context for furthering studies using more recently developed methods. In an effort to minimize destructive analyses, we developed a sampling strategy that would allow us to address the following questions: the timing of the occupation of Paquimé, the dating of the Viejo and Medio periods based on burials from Convento and Paquimé, the dating of specific rooms and features, and the closing date for Paquimé, all through AMS dating. Composition of the burial sample and identification of migrants by geographical location through the analysis of strontium and oxygen isotopes, and dietary variation over time, and within the site through analysis of stable isotopes of carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen. In the interest of time, I won't be discussing the oxygen or the hydrogen isotope data in this presentation. In the first year of our project, we completed a pilot study to make sure that we could obtain the desired information from the skeletal and dental remains. Once we demonstrated that the preservation would allow us to do that, our second visit to the Museo de las Culturas del Norte allowed us to complete sample collection, although not exactly as planned due to differential preservation and availability of remains. Individuals from Paquimé were selected for inclusion in the larger study based on several criteria, including burial location, mortuary treatment, age at death, and sex. A total of 18 units of the site included burials. The number of individuals sampled from each unit was proportional to the total number of individuals buried in that unit. Mortuary treatment included individuals that were identified as formal burials and those that were identified as disarticulated and often incomplete individuals by DePeso at the time of the original excavation. We attempted to obtain samples from both adults and some adolescents from approximately equal numbers of males and females, and finally individuals from several distinct contexts, including ball court burials and the more elaborate tombs, were included in the sample. The purpose of dating the human remains was to test several hypotheses put forward by previous researchers. We wanted to know if the Viejo period represented by the Convento site predated remains from various parts of Paquimé, or if there was some overlap. We dated individuals representing phases within the Viejo period as proposed by DePeso to compare the AMS dates with those dates suggested by him. We also tested the hypothesis put forward by DePeso that there was a Diablo phase, which he described as a final closing event. He suggested that the remains that are not formal burials were interred during this phase. Casarino had tested this hypothesis by obtaining 4 AMS dates, and his sample did not support a Diablo phase. Our sampling focused on formal burials and these incomplete or non-interred specimens so that we could further determine if they dated to the later phase or through the occupation of the site. And our results from a larger sample support those of Casarino. Another question we addressed was whether individual rooms and other features such as the ball court and central plaza were used as places of burial at different times or throughout the entire occupation. And we also wanted to know the dates of individuals within burial tombs relative to one another. Finally, we wanted to know the closing date for Paquimé, recognizing that someone had to bury the last dated burials. Some research has suggested that the site was occupied more recently than was initially proposed, and a comprehensive study by Phillips and Gamboa compiled the dates from Paquimé and surrounding sites and examined the evidence for the end of the occupation, concluding that abandonment was around the mid-15th century. Beyond comparisons within Paquimé and between Paquimé and Convento, our results should also be of interest within the larger region. Small bone tissue samples were obtained from 100 individuals for the purpose of obtaining AMS dates.
Dr. N, sorry
Yes.
for the... Could you please put the presentation, because we cannot see beyond the first page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You control that, so put it.
Yes,
put it.
well, I've been advancing it, but I have two screens. Is this the screen that you're seeing?
Yes.
Okay, I've made it a presentation mode.
Could you press the presentation mode, because we
No, I do. I have two screens on my computer, so I'm seeing both of them. Just a minute. I stopped. So that's what, do you see it? How's that?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to see you in case. I'll go back then. Sorry.
It's okay.
Well,
It's okay.
this is what I've already said. And the slides pretty much mirror what I said. And that's where I was. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, small bone tissue samples were obtained from 100 individuals for the purpose of obtaining AMS dates. A total of 77 radiocarbon dates were successfully obtained, and this includes 62 dates from Paquimé and 14 from the neighboring site, Convento. All dates were determined at the Chrono Lab at Queen's University, Belfast, under the direction of Paula Reimer, and Bayesian modeling was also done at Chrono by Cormac McSperiment. The radiocarbon dates for many of the individuals we sampled fall into an area of the radiocarbon curve with a large range of variation. Bayesian modeling is helpful in suggesting the more probable actual date within the variation, but we found that many of the questions we wanted answers to were the same questions that were needed to improve the modeling. And just as an example is the presumed stratigraphy within burial tombs. So I hope everybody can see that. With respect to the dates of the Viejo and Medeo burials, we tested two models, an overlapping model and a contiguous model. We have dates from 14 individuals from the Viejo period from the Convento site. One was rejected as too recent, as up to 1950. The agreement index for the overlapping model is 85%, and for the contiguous model shown here is 93%. So both are above the 60% agreement that is compatible with the dates. So while most individuals from the Convento site predate those from Paquimé, there was some overlap with some later burials at Convento and the earliest Medeo burials at Paquimé. Within the Viejo period, De Peso proposed three phases: Convento, Pilon, and Peros Bravos. Our dates, based on burials assigned to each of those phases, are quite a bit later than those proposed by De Peso, and they also indicate that the three phases overlap one another. With respect to the temporal relationship between the formally interred specimens and those termed non-interred or commingled and scattered, two models were tested using Bayesian analysis. The first is the contiguous model, in which interred individuals would predate non-interred individuals. The agreement index for that is only 4.2%. The second model is an overlapping model, where it's assumed that interred individuals predate non-interred, but that there will be overlap in the dates of the two groups. The agreement index for this model is lower at 3.8%, also well below the 60%, which is considered to be compatible with the radiocarbon evidence. Finally, a third model, which groups all burials as broadly contemporaneous and shows them by date from earliest to latest, is shown here. And of note, there are non-interred individuals indicated with the star who appear early and in a good part of the the calibration curve that produces tight calibrated ranges. Also one very recent, also in the tighter area of the curve. So the presence of early and late non-interred specimens indicate that they occur throughout the occupation of the site. Of course, there are some in the middle too, but I haven't indicated those. We plotted the earliest and latest dates in 2 sigma ranges for individuals from each unit to see if there's evidence for the use of units at differing times. They're ordered by the earliest to latest lower ranges of dates. And you can see there's a progression in the lower range of dates. And there's an outlier in unit 4 that skews it quite a bit. And this has a very recent date. It's the same individual that was indicated as a non-interred specimen in the previous graph with the star at a very late date. Finally, in order to date the end of Paquimé, a model was used which considers all dates from within Paquimé. This model, with an agreement index of 100%, shows the transition from Viejo to Medio, and thus the start of Paquimé between 1255 to 1277, the end of Paquimé at 1421 to 1460, and this is very similar and encompasses the end date determined by Phillips and Gamboa from multiple sources of information. Grouping all dates, including those from Convento, provides a starting date of 876 to 1066, 1006. For the strontium isotopes, we sampled 2 teeth per individual, one that formed early in life and one, ideally the 3rd molar, that formed later in childhood. Because bone mineral is porous and readily exchangeable, it's easily contaminated in the burial environment. Tooth enamel is much denser and not subject to exchange, and therefore less susceptible to diagenetic alteration. However, it doesn't give us the same information about place of residence that we might get from bone, but we preferred data that we thought was more reliable. Samples include 82 individuals from Paquimé and 13 individuals from Convento. The main objective of the strontium and oxygen isotope studies was to determine if there were differences in the places of origin of people buried in more elaborate tombs with higher status items as compared to those without indicators of high status. We wanted to specifically address ideas about foreign traders or migrants coming into the region and whether cultural development was internal or had external influences, since cultural influences may enter a region without direct migration of individuals. Did migrants enter the region from the north and present-day American Southwest, from West Mexico, and or from Mesoamerica? Geologic tracers can differentiate foreigners from locals and indicate the place of origin of foreigners if there are comparable data from those regions. Combining information from dates and from geological tracers allows us to address the question of migration throughout the occupation of the site. Interpretations of strontium isotope data first require establishing a local range. This can be done by analyzing local fauna that live within a narrow geographical area, or it can be determined from variation within the sample itself. Ideally, both approaches would be used, and that's what we did in this study. So you can see here a plot of individuals from Paquimé and the local faunal mean plus or minus 3 standard deviations. And around them, people considered non-locals. So we had small mammals from Casas Grande and neighboring sites providing strontium isotope ratios ranging from 0.706 to 0.707, and faunal samples from Paquimé ranging from 0.70693 to 0.70737. So this is showing you what we established as the local range, we being Adrian. This was Adrian's thesis research. The second approach to determining the local range is to use the distribution of data from individuals analyzed. In a number of studies, the local range is considered to be those individuals falling within 2 standard deviations of the mean. But when we looked at the faunal range alone, a number of individuals fell outside, and as was also the case with using plus or minus 2 standard deviations. And what I mean by that is falling outside, but looking as if they're part of the normal distribution. So this range was enlarged to include all those falling within 3 standard deviations of the mean strontium isotope ratio, which seemed to capture the central tendency of the distribution. So it's a conservative approach. We might have included some people as local who were not. Individuals falling outside the local range will have migrated into the region. Strontium isotope studies have been carried out in several surrounding regions of interest. These include the American Southwest, at Grasshopper Pueblo, and the Middle San Juan, and northern New Mexico. Strontium isotope ratios from these sites range from 0.7083 to 0.7117, and these are higher than the ratios from Northwest Mexico. Geological strontium, in the absence of strontium isotope data from local fauna or humans, geological data may provide some indication of the place of origin or help to rule out likely origin from an area. So geological strontium isotope data from sites along the Sierra Madre Occidental, southeastern Chihuahua, northeast Durango, eastern Zacatecas, and throughout Sinaloa have lower strontium isotope ratios. Central and southern Sonora have geologic strontium isotope ratios between 0.7062 and 7070, with a few samples yielding slightly higher values. These are not directly comparable to ratios derived from individuals, that is fauna or humans, but they do provide baseline values for the region. We were also able to obtain strontium isotope data from 4 samples from 2 sites excavated by Jane Kelly in what she terms the southern region, just south of Casas Grandes, for comparative purposes. And these are CH159 and 254. From available published data, as well as sites analyzed by our group, individuals from the American Southwest, north of Paquimé, will have higher strontium isotope ratios, while those from further south in Mexico will have lower strontium isotope ratios. 3 of the non-locals from Convento, also shown here, plot just above the local range. So please keep in mind we don't have comparative data from all of the potential regions of migration. Both Convento and Paquimé had similar proportions of local and non-local individuals. Of course, our sample size from Paquimé is much larger. At Paquimé, non-locals don't cluster in terms of date, although many dates are imprecise. And all of the high status burials that we sampled are local or from the immediate region. Data on burial type and burial inclusion of prestige items does not support the presence of local elites. So the majority, 87% of individuals sampled for strontium isotopes had values consistent with Paquimé or other sites in the Casas Grandes region. This supports local development models that suggest population growth at Paquimé was driven by population aggregation from within the region, as opposed to an influx of migrants from neighboring regions. Individuals classified as non-local had strontium isotope signatures consistent with values in the American Southwest, south of Paquimé, and West Mexico. The most elaborate high-status burials at Paquimé had local strontium isotope values, and in particular, we note 2 articulated burials forming the bottom layer of the 4413 elite tomb. None of the migrants, that is, individuals with non-local strontium isotope signatures, received elaborate burial treatment, which would be indicative of elite social status. The analysis of suspected human sacrifices from the ceremonial ball cord in Unit 14 and from the top layer of disarticulated remains in 4413 revealed that 4 of the 6 individuals sampled had non-local isotope signatures, while the 2 remaining were likely from the region. Dietary isotopes can indicate variation in people buried with evidence of differing status, location, and dates. We didn't expect there to be a great deal of variation in the region over time of interest, but by analyzing individuals, we gain another potential source of variation along with the geological indicators and dates. Stable isotopes of carbon and nitrogen were analyzed from collagen and bone, in tooth dentin, and also from enamel carbonate. The collagen from dentin provides information on diet in childhood, as long as it hasn't been remodeled, when teeth are forming, and may be compared to bone collagen, which reflects diet over a longer period of time. This plot shows Paquimé relative to whether people were considered local or non-local, and then compared to a number of other sites in the region. So the stable carbon isotope data support archaeological evidence for reliance on maize and the importance of maize horticulture in the area. Overall, stable isotopes of carbon and nitrogen at Paquimé resemble those at other sites in the American Southwest and Northwest Mexico, or Northern Mexico. There's ample evidence for the presence of maize and other C4 resources, canned plants such as agave, soto, cactus buds, and as well as consumption of animals that would have consumed C4 and or canned plants in the archaeological evidence surrounding the sites in the region, as well as from Paquimé. The stable nitrogen isotope data, along with other sources of information such as faunal analysis, suggests that meat from herbivorous species would include rabbits, hares, deer, antelope, and bison. Some of the data shown here is also from Monica Webster's work done in Jane Kelly's southern region. The extent of any dampening effect that low nitrogen isotope value beans might have on the isotope ratios from nitrogen is not clear. Our data do show that marine resources were not consumed, and this supports the findings by King et al. And others who suggest that marine shell might have been used for food preparation, but not as food. There's a very slight difference in the carbon isotope ratios between Viejo and Madeo individuals, but when the non-locals are removed, this difference disappears. We also looked at diet among individuals from each of the units, and they cluster a fair bit, but once again, Unit 4 is skewed because of the one individual who was the non-interred local specimen who has a lower carbon isotope ratio and a higher nitrogen isotope ratio. Based on the analysis of tooth enamel, juvenile individuals may have had slightly different diets than adolescent individuals, but not statistically significant. There's no consistent pattern between the dietary stable isotope values and the variables associated with social identity, elite status, mortuary treatment, local versus non-local, etc. Although the various social identities and roles at Paquimé may have been associated with consumption of different foods, they would not be isotopically distinctive. We do have 2 outliers with respect to the dietary isotopes, one that I just mentioned. These are from units 4 and 6. So burial 1 from unit 4, a young adult male, has a later date than many of the burials, as well as a lower carbon isotope ratio, higher nitrogen isotope ratio. Burial 3 from unit 6, an adolescent female, has an earlier date, but with similar isotopic ratios as the burial 1 from unit 4. And both of these were type 2 or non-interred, and both were placed in the Diablo phase by De Peso. With respect to strontium isotopes, both are considered to be local. Our isotope analyses of individuals from Convento and Paquimé has resolved some of the questions that we hope to answer. Not all of them. AMS dates support the earlier and slightly overlapping times of the Viejo and Medio periods as represented by Convento and Paquimé. While many of the dates within units are too imprecise to sort out the order of burials, we are able to say that it's possible that some bone scatter overlying more formal burials predates the formal burials, and that supports the work of Rikita with respect to later ritual, the idea of later ritual manipulation of burials. Comparisons of formal burials and non-interred or type 2 burials do not support a Diablo phase, but rather the non-interred occur early and throughout the occupation of the site. Our AMS dates support the conclusions of Phillips and Gamboa regarding the closing of the site around 1450. Strontium isotope data indicate that there was not a large influx of immigrants, such as elite traders, but the cultural development was more likely internal, with a smaller influx of individuals from the greater region, and some from the American Southwest and others from West Mexico. Immigrants do not correlate with high status burials. Finally, dietary isotopes show little variation with a few outliers who showed lesser reliance on C4 plants, but still quite a bit of reliance, although both of these are considered local from our geological data. So I'd like to acknowledge our funding source and all of the people who helped to make this study possible, and to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Let's wait if we have a question or comments. ¿Comentarios o preguntas, Elías?
No, por el momento no, Oscar.
Okay, Doctor. Well, we have no questions, neither.
I know it's lunchtime, so.
Yes, you're right. So we would like to appreciate your work, your time, and your information. Thank you for everything.
Thank you very much, and I hope the rest of your meeting goes very well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.